let's get into Tutu.
Yay, the star of the show.
Yes. So I watched Tutu for the first time over Crimbo break when Nina was home.
Well, you finished it.
Finished. We watched a bit of it when over Thanksgiving when my boyfriend was over. And it's a show that I had seen a bit of earlier when Nina first got the DVD box set. And then
It's a show that at first it was something that me and my younger sister Lucy shared together. It was like our show. 'Cause I just thought it was really cute and she would really like it, so we watched it together. And also she used to do ballet. But at that point, Nikki hadn't watched it yet.
Yeah. I mean, I saw some of it with you guys, and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cute. It's a cute animated for kids just about ballet and friends. Okay. And then I read I proofread Nina's thesis paper, in which this is one of the 4, Maho Shoujo, shows that she covered in that. And I read, like, her synopsis of how it ends up and, like, for all the themes about, like, everything that we're about to talk about. And I look at Nina, I was like, when did this show become about that? Because in the first 4 episodes I had seen at that point, it certainly wasn't there.
After the first 4 episodes.
Basically, episode 5.
It's gotta wind up. It's like Steven Universe. These things can't go from 0 to go.
Yeah, so I read that, I'm like, Nina, this sounds like the craziest goddamn television show ever made.
It kinda is.
Yeah, so ever since then, I've been really interested to watch it, and I finally got around to watching it. And I really dug it. I really dug what it was doing. Yeah, and I also liked how it was pretty silly at times, because it wasn't the highest budget affair.
Right. So, like, if you would give, like, an overall impression, what would you say? Other than thumbs up.
I think it's a very cute show whose presentation unfortunately kind of belies how smart the show actually is. Because, like, I would have been very surprised by where the show ended up going had I not already read your paper about it.
Mm-hmm. And even then you were surprised. Because it was kind of funny. We got to a certain episode, and then Nikki was like, we can't not finish it. And then we finished the whole damn thing in one day.
Yeah.
Which I was surprised by, because normally Nikki doesn't like marathoning things too much. Nikki's usually a 5 episode, and then I gotta take a break kind of guy.
Yeah, I can do small bursts.
But for this, he was like, I can't, like, we finished season 1, and I was like, okay, Nikki's probably gonna want to do something else. He's like, no! Put it in! And I was like, okay! Yeah, Princess Tutu is an anime I had heard a lot about among anime people as one of those shows that a lot of people said, like, is very emotional and it might make you tear up or cry. And it's also one that can be at the butt of a many joke because it's called Princess Tutu. The name itself is very silly and it, like, you know, looks kind of silly and very girly. But the writing really is the strength here. I mean, the show doesn't have the best budget. It was an original story that later got a manga adaptation afterwards. Produced in 2002 for Studio HAL Filmmaker, which I'm looking at the stuff that they do. Haven't heard of a lot.
Oban Star Racers.
Yeah, that's good. I don't think they make stuff anymore. They haven't made something since 2010.
Yep.
But a lot of the stuff they've made looks to be, more, like, lower budget stuff. And to be a director, they also seem to focus on, like, a handful of directors, too. Including Junichi Sato, who directed, Princess Tutu. However, Princess Tutu is... Junichi Sato, if you don't know, directed a lot of Sailor Moon, as well as was the director for Sailor Moon before Ikuhara took over. However...
And also, Princess Tutu creator, Ikuko Ito, was also animation director for a lot of Sailor Moon.
Yes. And this is definitely the brainchild of Ikiko Ito. And she is a woman, I would like to just preface, just for clarity's sake. And this is her idea. You know, it's inspired by ballet and fairy tales, particularly like Swan Lake and a little bit of Ugly Duckling and some opera and craziness thrown in. A lot of high culture. You'll feel very cultured by the end of this silly cartoon anime about a duck that's a girl.
Yeah. A duck that's a girl that's a duck.
That's a princess. Duck. This was a ADV film project here in North America, and it feels very much like an early AD film adaptation. We did watch the dub, which is part of the silliness factor.
Yes.
I think it's a solid dub for the time period. It hasn't aged super well, but I still think it mostly holds up.
I think there is some stuff in there that's absolutely just sublime. Like, Muto in the early episodes is the fucking best.
He is very funny, yes.
and Duck is extremely charming. I'm actually looking for the English translation of the manga. They kept the name as Ahiru. That's garbage.
Ahiru, yeah. There are some people in the fandom who insist that's the more accurate word, but Ahiru just means duck in Japanese, as in the animal.
This means like a little quacky bastard.
So
like,
it's not a name that people have.
It's not a name that people have. It's a name that birds have.
Like Lucy Christensen, who played Tutu in the English dub, I think did a phenomenal job. Some background characters were a bit grating, but I think it overall works.
Anteater Arena.
Now, I'm thinking more PK and Lilie make me want to die. For multiple reasons, but their voices certainly don't help. Lilie's the worst. I hate her. But yeah, the premise is kind of crazy, which I realized when I tried to describe it to people. Like the first episode, even Nikki was like, what the fuck is going on? Because everything starts off kind of vague. So we have like a story within a story within a story going on here.
And all of these stories are about stories.
On top of it all, yes.
Wikipedia says Princess Tutu is a metafictional, this is the first word, ballet-themed magical girl dramatic musical anime TV series.
Which isn't wrong, but sounds like a lot for what it looks like.
Especially if you were to see like any 5 isolated minutes, you're like, where's the metafiction? It's just a bunch of still frames that are trying to trick me into thinking it's dancing.
Yeah. I mean, especially, Nikki watched this after watching Yuri on Ice, so
yeah, and it's like, I wouldn't have been as cognizant of like, oh, they didn't animate this. Because they use what are well-established tricks to convey motion when you can't afford to do it.
Yeah, like 2002, this was how you did ballet. Like this is before Yuri on Ice, which I now say is the best ballet anime, even though it's technically not ballet. This was kind of the only ballet anime we had that even tried a little bit. And there were some sequences that tried.
Yeah,
actually,
they were very good at doing that, like, spin on the 1 foot toes thing. Because that's loopable. You only have to do 1 loop of that, and then, like, that's easy to do.
But yeah,
comparatively.
This show cuts a lot of corners with the animation. Like, I have a friend who insists she can never watch it because both of her parents were dancers growing up, and they have a dance troupe, so she was around dancing her whole life. So to watch this poorly animated dancing makes her cringe and want to die inside. Like, I first brought it up to her, I'm like, oh, Princess Tutu's so cute. She's like, oh, their posture's the worst. And I'm like, oh, okay. Which is like, you know what? Probably. For one thing, they're very, like, their anatomy is highly stylized, even for an anime.
Yeah.
And there's not much budget. But the writing is a top-notch, and that's what we're here for. Like, even, like, the colors are kind of muted, which they did a lot in the early 2000s for shows that were trying to be a bit more dreamlike or vague, which I don't really personally like, because it feels like your brightness isn't on all the way on your TV. Yeah. Like, it feels like something's wrong with the resolution. It looks like a bad
VHS.
Yeah. Like, I get what they're trying to go for, but I don't like the execution.
Yeah. Character design is hit and miss.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on your sense of style. I mean, it is very much leaning towards the more for kids magical girl. And that's one thing I do want to emphasize. This show, from its beginning to end, was marketed and intended for young girls. It's not like trying to be a Utna or a Madoka or like a crazy, like, let's do something really out there. It was always working within like a very child-friendly, typical magical girl sort of mode. Like, the characters are probably around the same age as they are in Utna, but the presentation is very different.
Yeah.
So the premise is...
Well, they're younger. They're, like, established to be preteen.
Yeah, they're like middle school, but technically so is Utna in middle school.
Oh, it is? Well, well, alright, there we go. I thought she was in high school because she's 8 feet tall.
They're always in middle school for some reason. Okay, so the premise, we're gonna take this step by step.
Okay. And I'm gonna let Nina do this, and I'll just, like, add some color commentary. I'll, like, try to put in the goofs, because Nina's, like, I was thinking about this before we recorded, it's like, shit, do I actually have a good enough handle on what happened?
Yeah, I've seen it, like, 5 times at this point, so I think I have a good handle on what's going on. So once upon a time, long before the events of everything happening take place, there was a writer, this guy named Drosselmeyer, and he has this power to make the stories that he writes come to life, make them become reality, in his reality. We're not going to do the extra layer of saying all of this is a story and a fiction, because that should be established. So,
yeah.
Layer number 1, we got this Drosselmeyer guy who's influencing his reality with the stories that he writes. He was in the middle of writing a story called The Prince and the Raven, where the characters were locked in eternal battle. It was kind of typical fairy tale-esque story. Not any specific fairy tale, but had all the tropes. But he died in the midst of writing that story. Even so, because he wrote it, it had an effect on reality, and the characters were able to break free into the real world. The Raven got out, and then the Prince followed him. So we have these 2 characters, the Raven and the Prince, who are fictional beings from a storybook into this world, running around, running amok, making things crazy. To seal the Raven away and keep it from being evil and mucking up both the real story and the world of this, both the real world and the world of the story, the prince shatters his heart with a forbidden power and seals the Raven away with fairy tale magic. However, it causes him to lose his memories and his emotions, and he wanders about the world trying to figure out what to do with his life. Meanwhile, even though Drosselmeyer's dead, he still has a presence that's affecting the world. His story is continuing. He's found some way to break the system and continue to manipulate reality by continuing the story of his. And he decides it needs an ending. So he finds a way to move his story along by falling upon a little duck in a pond who's in love with this prince. And he gives her a magic pendant that allows her to transform into a girl and then into Princess Tutu, which was a character that he wrote in the original Prince and the Raven story, and tasked her with the mission to find all the prince's heart shards, return them to him so the story can end. And that's sort of where we leave off. So then we're in Duck's point of view. Duck wakes up from being a duck and being told all this stuff by Drosselmeyer to waking up, and now she's going to a dance academy middle boarding school where she's practicing ballet.
In a very, like, German-coded town.
The characters, like, are writing in German. Like, all the signs are in German. Like, it's basically, if this show could be in the language it's supposed to be in, it's supposed to be in German.
Yeah, a lot of characters have German names, like PK and Lilie, like that's how they are pronounced with German phonetics.
And Retzel, and stuff like that.
Drosselmeyer, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
That was close.
Well, that's also the name of the uncle from the Nutcracker who gives Clara the Nutcracker, was Uncle Drosselmeyer. Okay, so we have all this backstory. Where the story starts is we got Duck. She's a little awkward little kid who's late for class and isn't very good at ballet, going to ballet school with shitty friends. And then sometimes she transforms into Princess Tutu to save a fellow classmate named Muto, who also is the prince from the story, from himself, from not being himself. So,
more immediately, she saves him from falling out a window.
Yeah, from himself, because he jumped out a window.
He, kind of slooped out a window.
With no pants on. Because dancers don't wear pants. So then she remembers what she's supposed to do. She's like, oh yeah, I'm Duck, and I'm a princess, and I'm gonna blah blah blah. So then it kind of moves into its more typical Mahou Shoujo setup, where you got this dual life thing going on. And then for the first 4 episodes, we kind of forget about all this weird plot, background stuff, as we sort of just settle into the dynamics of who these characters are, and what they do, and what they're like. And then all that stuff comes just headlong crashing into things, and it's like, oh yeah, we're part of some greater destiny, and we have no free will over our lives because we're at the mercy of this one dude and what he wants, and our lives are just a story to him. The other players, and we have Muto, who, his name is Mytho. It's spelled Mytho like myth, but that's a little too on point.
Here's the Japanese way to pronounce that, it just comes out to Muto. And when the localizers were doing that, it's like, this is too much.
Yeah.
We're gonna stick it with Muto. If that's okay with everybody. Hey, everybody! Yeah.
Yeah. There's also Muto's girlfriend, Rue, who's the best ballerina in the class. She is presented as a foil to Tutu even before she dons her evil identity. She's seen as kind of...
They're the white and black swans.
Yes.
From the lake.
Yeah, she's the Odile, where Tutu's the, Odette.
You know, that movie where Natalie Portman kisses Mila Kunis. You know.
Everyone's seen that movie.
Yes, the only...
That movie was pretty okay.
The only piece of media having to do with Swan Lake.
Okay, let's break down all the Swan Lake media that Nikki knows. That movie, this show, and Barbie Swan Lake, which you had on VHS, and I watched a bunch for some reason.
Yeah, Barbie Swan Lake probably was my first Swan Lake.
And I guess Ever After High a bit.
A little bit. So Rue is Muto's girlfriend. But Muto doesn't have any emotions, like we said. He has no personality, he's got nothing going on. She just tells him what to do all the time, and he does it. And when you're first presented to her, honestly, when you're first presented to all the characters, you're kind of rubbed the wrong way. You're kind of like, I don't like any of this. This makes me really uncomfortable. And Tutu's the same. Tutu's like, oh, Rue, she's so pretty and cool. Why is she like that? And then we have Fakir, who is Muto's best friend, and also the only other male ballet person. What's the male ballerina?
I'm gonna look this up because, I feel like ballerino can't be...
Can't be right.
No, it is.
It is? Okay.
In Italian, at least.
Alright. He's the only other ballerino in the class, along with Muto, who's the best ballerino. He's, again, the more dark version of Muto. There's a lot of color symbolism here as well. He's got darker hair. And he is Muto's best friend, but again, he's very domineering and manipulative, and you get these really weird vibes, and he's always telling Muto what to do.
And he looks like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Character of the day.
He does, but without as bad of hair.
Alright, in French, a male dancer is referred to as danseur, and in Italian, it's actually commonly danzatore.
Danzatore.
But ballerino is a word.
Okay,
I
I'm
don't
just
know what
going
it's
to
used in
use that
These
word.
terms are rarely used in English.
Then what do the English people use? That's the language that I am speaking.
Ballet dancers. It's like firefighter. They like took it, they degendered it. Ballerino is slang, but yeah, just everyone is ballet dancers and then you're either male or female.
Okay, fine. We'll use
Yeah.
the American standardization because
The first rank is premier danseur noble.
yeah, the
Premier
like
noble
prima
dancer.
like prima ballerina. It's
Yeah.
the best one. Or
Well,
number one.
the best one is prima ballerina assoluta.
Absolute.
Yeah.
She's the absolute first ballerina.
It's a Transformers naming structure.
Yeah, so Tutu finds herself going at finding Rue and Fakir to be kind of antagonistic to her goal of restoring the prince's heart. Now, she has a huge big old crush on the prince. She really cares about him. She wants him to have his life back. She's worried about him because she's like, he doesn't have... Does anybody else realize that he's not like a person? Like, does anybody else realize this kid has got a problem?
Does anybody notice that he doesn't react like a human or even an animal would?
And like all the people around him are like, yeah, no, this is normal, this is fine, this is good, this is how he's supposed to be. And she's like, ah!
He's just demure. It's like, no, that's not what that is.
So in the very beginning, we have our sort of monster of the week, but they're not monsters, because one of the really cool things that Princess Tutu does is that there's no fighting. Princess Tutu conquers evil or solves problems not through fighting, but through dance and talking. When she encounters a heart shard, it will have sort of taken over the insecurities of another person living in Gold Crown Town. So, say the feeling of loneliness will take over this poor widow who's feeling real sad because she's a widow. And then Princess Tutu has to show up and do a dance with her and talk her through her grief and explain to her that I know you're very sad, but this isn't who you are, and you're being influenced by something else, and you can grow, and you can overcome this, and you're great. While they dance. Which is kind of neat, because like even normal magical girls will shoot like a laser beam, or a heart cannon, or something, where she is just like, no,
Yeah.
no violence. Violence is bad. Which I agree with.
I think it was cool, although I'll be honest, like, the whole time I was watching it, I was in my mind designing a fighting game character who is a ballerina with a sledgehammer, because it's like a contrast of the delicate and the brutish. It's great, trust me.
Well, Fakir at one point, once he broke out his sword, did do some fight dancing. He did do some twirling around with his sword.
Yeah.
So
Some Raphael from Soul Calibur shit.
So she finds these heart shards, which represent different emotions, returns it to Muto, and he starts to change. However, the first couple emotions he receives are all generally negative ones.
They're all bad. It's like I sent it to Nina as a joke, and she's like, "Shh, that's the plot." It's like, yeah, jealous. Like, there's jealousy, loneliness. One of them is,
I think.
One of them is eventually just pain, and it happens to him, and he's just like,
Yeah, the first four ones
like,
are, I think,
maybe like sadness. He's like sad for the first time.
he
like,
gets
all of the words-
loneliness, jealousy, sadness, pain, and pride first.
Yeah,
So
like,
he's just a wreck. So he's getting all fucked up, and then Duck is like, oh,
I should have
I'm
done these in
hurting
an
him.
order.
So Rue and Fakir are pissed, and they seem to know something that she doesn't. And they won't tell her, because they don't know who she is, because even though she looks exactly like she does when she transforms, apparently when Duck transforms into Tutu, she appears as a white swan, so nobody can tell who she is, or whatever. But at this point, nobody knows who she is, and everyone's kind of confused, and Rue and Fakir are not having this whole Muto having emotions thing. Because Rue wants Muto to love her, and she feels like if he has any emotions, he won't like her, because she thinks she's been taught her whole life that she's terrible. So she thinks the only person who can love her is someone who doesn't have any feelings.
If someone with absolutely no ability to have discernment, and also somebody who's really easy to bully.
Right, and Fakir...
Like, you love me, don't you, Muto? Yes. That's the thing
she's
about...
like, tell me that you love me. Okay.
I love you.
Like, this is the thing about Jay Hickman's performance as Muto, which works the best when he has no emotions. He's so deadpan. He's like... delivering his lines like it's got to be like 3 feet away from the mic. He's impossibly quiet and meek, and it's so good. And I actually looked up Jay Hickman. You know who else he has played in a show that we've talked about on this podcast?
What?
He was Mekazawa
In
Cromartie High School, the robot.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, that's the same era. Yeah, super rad.
It's kind of maybe the opposite side of the dub coin, where it's like, this is a dub which is as charming as it is, I wouldn't say holds up very well, whereas the Cromartie dub is the best dub I've ever fucking heard. I'm gonna fucking watch Cromartie High School after we're done recording.
Okay. But yeah, I guess about that, I think that's a good time to mention about the prince. I mean, this is an interesting take on the prince character in the sense that he is a lifeless, manipulable doll. You know, he has no will. He has no... Really, I mean, everybody says he has power, but he can't do anything. He has no emotions. He's got nothing. He's very much like the maiden in distress. That's the role that he plays within this story. He's the maiden that needs to be saved.
He has no agency fitting with that trope. He can't do anything.
At, like, literally anything. Hence why Rue and Fakir are always telling him what to do.
I bet Fakir...
Yes?
At least in the beginning, Fakir was wiping his butt. And he, taught him.
It's possible, because he didn't
or created
know
some
anything.
kind of Rube Goldberg machine that would wipe his butt for him.
Because the reason Fakir doesn't want Muto to get his emotions back is because he knows about the story. And he knows what the prince has gone through, and he knows it just will end up poorly for him, and he doesn't want him to get hurt again. He's like, if you just stay the way you are, nothing bad will happen to you again, things can be the status quo, we can be friends, we won't have to face our fate and all this stupid crap. Because the story is a bad story, and it's bad for you.
See, here's the central thing, which I'm, like, you put this in your paper, and I think finally now totally grasping it.
Okay.
Is that we've got this core cast of Duck, Mytho, Muto, Fakir, and Rue. And they represent superficially the 4 kind of fairy tale archetypes of the princess, the prince, the knight, and the witch. But they keep switching them.
Yes. Constantly.
They keep passing those balls all over the place. Like, Princess Tutu is ostensibly our princess, but she's, the hero, which is already a magical girl thing. Like, that's where they fucking started.
She's more like the prince, because literally the reason why the story starts is because she's doing things. Really, she's the person doing things for most of the series. She's the only one affecting what's happening to everybody.
She's the only catalyst.
Exactly. But
the other 3 were going to keep doing their thing forever.
Yeah. And yeah, she's the princess, but she can't confess her love or whatever. She's not fated to be, but she's also the one doing the thing. The prince, again, we establish he's a maiden. He's a maiden who can't do anything for himself, and he's constantly at the mercy of whatever the fuck the story decides to throw at him. When he gets his emotions, he has no control. He gets corrupted, he has no control. He never has control, ever. And even when he does finally get his whole life together, he's still operating under what he's supposed to do as a character in a story. Our knight doesn't really knight it about. He's way too overprotective, he's bad at his job, and everybody tells him he's bad at his job.
He's risk averse, which is contrary to that archetype.
Yeah. He's very
His
pragmatic.
dad's a blacksmith, and that's kind of as far as he got.
Yeah, pretty much. And then our witch is also a princess.
Our witch is a victim.
She's a victim. She's an antagonist. She's sympathetic. And she's a friend to our other players. Tutu never stops believing, or Duck never stops believing in Rue. That she's a good person and that she isn't gone.
And also, this is an endgame spoiler, but like we talked about spoilers, she ends up with the prince.
Yeah, she becomes his princess. As she always wanted to be. And it's her love for the prince that saves him from his curse. It's true love breaks the curse. It's her true love that breaks the curse, not our heroine, or who we were told was our heroine, but this character who's been very all over the place and conflicted within herself and against the other characters. She's the one who ultimately saves the day with this very selfless act, which ends up saving her. So we have all these players and they're changing roles, which is kind of what the show's about. It's about these traditional fairy tale roles and playing with them and in a way that's easy for kids to understand and presents options. And the main antagonist is the person who's pulling the strings, the person that's controlling all these people's lives against their will, which is Drosselmeyer. So once Muto gets his bad feelings and he starts freaking out, things start getting more complicated. Tutu isn't just up against whatever obstacle of the week. She has to reevaluate her own self-worth. She has to reevaluate who she is as a girl, who she actually is. Is she actually a duck? What does that mean? You know, her relationships with the other 4 players, how the other 4 players feel about her as Duck and her as Tutu. How does Muto feel about all this? For a long time, it takes us forever to know what he wants because he's never wanted anything before. And then he's like, no, I want my feelings back. And then everybody else is like, well, shit. I guess we have to let
That was the
him get
hard
what he wants.
one. Everything else would have been easier.
Exactly.
I was really hoping you would want us to give up and just go home.
So, the Raven starts making his presence known. Drosselmeyer will directly, literally stop the fabric of reality so he can intervene and talk to the characters and tell them what to do and manipulate their choices.
With his big, stupid, horrible face.
Nikki? I loved how Nikki immediately despised Drosselmeyer as soon as we were introduced to him.
He showed him oh, fuck that guy! He looks like a racist caricature of a specific kind of European from some kind of xenophobia that I'm not privy to. But he looks racist.
I'm not sure what the lizard on the back of his cape is supposed to represent as far as his role in the story is concerned.
I don't know.
I'm not sure. Because that always struck me as an interesting part of his design, but I was like, what does a lizard mean? Symbolically.
Yeah.
Then he also manipulates the story through Miss Adel, which is his puppet.
His haunted doll.
who has, what are those creepy music boxes called?
Street organ, Wikipedia says.
Creepy ass street organ.
Crank ass like some kind of horrible, organ grinder kind of thing. Some kind of horrible 3/4 haunted clown music.
Yeah. And she's presented as Duck's stranger mother figure whom has no origin, and we're like, Duck, why are you talking to this random
Duck
lady?
is so quick to trust this clearly haunted doll. She's got hair that's not connected to anything.
Yeah, her hairstyle is pretty inscrutable. But again, partly it's because this is Duck and she doesn't know who to trust, because the story is constantly changing the game. When she first wakes up from her dream, she's like, why is the teacher an animal? Does anybody else notice how the teacher's a cat who talks? But then she forgets about it and accepts it as normal. That's
that kind of dream logic thing where it's like, yeah, this is my house, but like your house is just one water slide in a field. But it's like, yeah, this is where I live.
But that's the insidious thing that Drosselmeyer is doing. He's creating this world that the players within just accept as normal, and they go along with it no matter how crazy or bizarre it is, and they don't realize they're being manipulated. They don't know how much they're being influenced in the story.
I think this show may have done a better job at being The Matrix than The Matrix was.
I actually haven't seen The Matrix, and I feel like The Matrix was trying to do a lot of things, but as far as not having control in agency-wise...
Yeah. Well, that makes sense, given what we now know that The Matrix is really about. Right. It's about being trans, everybody.
Well, I like how the bad guy here is a writer. Because there's a lot of significance to that. Like, the people who write our stories, the story makers, and those, are very important, because so much of what we define as normal is defined by the kind of media that we consume. And we're influenced so much by the media we consume and that's not to say all writers are like these evil masterminds trying to control our lives, but it's like this idea of the narrative, not just like a story narrative, but like a social narrative that we're all following because we've been told this is the way that the story goes. I think was a very clever way to do it that makes it sort of easy to understand. Where it's like, yeah, there's somebody writing the story, but who's writing the story? The show makes it simple by saying it's one guy writing the story. But in reality, we're all writing the story, but also being written by the story.
Yeah, and that was the crux of your paper, right? About how, like...
That's what I like to think, so.
About roles and play and how the two are constantly evolving based on the actions of the other. And it's also interesting to see any piece of literary work that vilifies authors. Because normally it's like, it's pretty simple, like, oh, I'm going to write a book about an author who's like me, so he's the best.
Well, authors have a lot of responsibility, especially when you're talking about, like, fairy tales. Yeah. How much impact have these classical narratives had on our way of seeing things, particularly gender, which is what I focused on in my paper, because all these roles these characters are playing are inherently gendered, and they have to do with agency and what they're capable of doing. And especially for kids, like, these are the stories we tell our children. And this is the way that we are supposed to frame what's right and wrong and good and bad and whatever. There are heroes and there are villains, and it's all clear-cut and easy. And then you take something like Tutu that's like, okay, let's take these simple stories that have a long history, that have been told for millennia, that have a very particular origin and are trying to teach very specific lessons, yet they seem to proliferate forever and have affected the way that we engage with other people and how we define ourselves and other people, even if we don't think about it like, I'm a princess. Like, in a marketing sense, you could be a princess, which is kind of manipulative and something you need to be aware of if you have young kids and you're buying them toys and stuff. But, and then like, making it a kids program and saying like, hey kids, this is something you're familiar with. Fairy tales. But what are fairy tales actually saying and doing? Without it being like, fairy tales are dark, blood, Cinderella's stepsisters get their feet cut off, blah, 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 blah. It's like...
These aren't fairy tales as told by Dracula, which is, I guess, what Nina was doing.
No, like, what are the
Unless Dracula and more... The Hotel Transylvania Dracula.
No, it's more like, what are the social implications of fairy tales? Like, what are the dark side of fairy tales in the sense of, like, what are they trying to teach people?
Yeah, but not like a fucking American McGee-ass, like, edgy bullshit kind of dark side of fairy tales.
Right. So, season 1 ends with Fakir and Tutu teaming up. Fakir learning who Tutu is, and them teaming up to face Rue, who has kidnapped Muto, and created this dire situation where the only way that Tutu can save Muto is to confess her love, but she finds a way around it by communicating through dance.
Because that's the thing, is that if she confesses her love, she'll turn back into she'll disappear.
She'll turn to a speck of light and disappear.
Yeah.
As per the story. We find out that the knight is fated to die in service to the prince, and that Fakir even has like this creepy birthmark ever since he was a kid that's supposed to signify where his body gets torn apart.
Yeah, he's got like a fucking crazy ass like scar from where he's supposed to be chopped in half.
Like, they've all had it kind of rough being written into these roles. Fakir is one of my favorite characters because it's so remarkable, like, how fast he develops. Like, in the very beginning of the show, he's a asshole. You don't like this guy. He's a piece of crap. But then by the end of just the first season, you're like, Fakir's our friend! Like, the way that the show slowly unveils the more positive aspects of unsavory characters and complicates characters, particularly Fakir and Rue, who are made more complicated as things go on. I think
not
it's done
Drosselmeyer.
Very well.
He always sucks.
Well, Drosselmeyer always sucks because there's got to be something's got to stay consistent.
Yeah. And the Raven is always a bad man.
The Raven never goes beyond his role in the story, and honestly, neither does the Prince. He's always doing what he's supposed to do within what his means. Once he's given the ability to do stuff. Because they're not real people, they're characters. That's the difference between, say, the Raven and the Prince, and Rue, Fakir, and Duck, is that they're actual, like, people outside of the story. Even though they've been forced to have these story roles, like, folded into who they are, they're not born from the story itself. But yeah, the Raven doesn't become not an evil guy. He's totally fine with being an evil guy. He has no reason to question his agency. So after that first season, it seems like things are working out pretty well. Rue's been thwarted. The Prince has gotten some more positive emotions. Fakir's our buddy now. Tutu has more confidence in herself. But
her horrible roommates aren't in it as much because they spend 100% of their screen time being horribly abusive to Duck.
Yeah, they're the worst part of the show.
Yeah.
By season 2, the Raven makes his presence known. And Muto becomes corrupted by the Raven's blood and starts doing the Raven's bidding.
And turns into a, like, weirdly sexy Raven man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Princess Crahy's already a very sexy Raven lady.
Well, she's a woman, she's a young woman with a Raven motif. He is a Raven wearing a shirt and pants.
Well, yeah, he later does actually transform into a Raven man.
That's what I was talking about.
Well, there was the part earlier when he would have, like, the Raven costume and his stupid tiny crown.
And he was trying to do a tough guy voice. He was like,
you must love me and only me. Selfish love is bad.
And only me. It's like,
that's not what love is, kids. Love isn't supposed to be selfish.
Yeah.
Children watching this show?
Yeah.
That's bad. So now Tutu finds herself fighting Muto more than actual other Muto and the Raven directly from fucking himself up over and fucking over the townfolk. Because the Raven decides that he wants a heart to eat. So Muto keeps trying to steal some pure person to feed their heart to the Raven. And then Rue has just kind of been sidelined by the Raven because her dad's getting... It's also been revealed that Rue is the Raven's daughter.
I was just about to ask, did we establish that?
No.
Because you don't want to just like keep talking and not establish that.
Yeah, Rue is the Raven's daughter. And she's been kind of doing his will, but now he's kind of sick of her.
Yeah, her real name is Princess Crahy, which is German for crow, because crows and ravens are the same animal.
Basically. And he treats her like shit.
Yeah, he's like,
you're ugly, but I love you anyway.
You're ugly and no one will love you except for me. Like, actually, classic abusive tactics.
Nobody
Really.
will love you except for me and the prince that I've specifically prepared for you because he's under my magic spell to love you.
Yeah, it's pretty standard, like, abuse tactics to make the person dependent on the abuser.
Right. So, Rue is just very lost and, very helpless at this point. She's trying to, establish the fact that she's needed by her father, but her father things keep going wrong, and her father's like, I don't really need you, you're annoying to me. And she's still so hopelessly in love with Muto, and now she's getting conflicted because he's not himself anymore. And granted, he was never himself, but she's starting to realize that she doesn't like this either. Like, she wants Muto to be allowed to be Muto. Like, she loves this fucking guy for whatever reason. And she's very unhappy about everything that's happening to him, and she feels guilty that she's done this to him. And is ruining his life and using him, and she feels like crap. And she doesn't feel like she has anyone to go to because she's broken off her relationship with the school, basically. She doesn't feel comfortable talking to Duck, even though Duck still wants to be her friend, because Duck is an angel. And she never had a good relationship with Fakir anyway, and she never really had friends. So she doesn't have anywhere to turn, and she's just kind of suffering alone. Fakir is growing much closer to Duck. He's developing feelings for her, which are pretty obvious. Like, the creators have basically confirmed it. Like, the actor who plays Fakir in the dub, what's his name?
His name is Chris Patton.
Chris Patton was basically instructed, like, your character's in love with Duck, and he's like, yeah. So he performs it as if, which is a little weird, because she is a duck, mind you. Like, the show never wants you to forget that she's actually a duck. Like the animal.
Yeah.
She's not a girl. He's softening up, and he's also realizing that, whoa, twist, he is a descendant of Drosselmeyer, which means he has inherited some capacity for his his reality warping writing powers. And he's trying to develop those in an effort to actually make a difference in the story, because he wasn't doing jack shit in his previous role.
Yeah, and like we learned through a flashback that as a little boy he used to love to write stories, but they came true and it got him. Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah, which I also think might be the plot of Myst.
Is it? Is that what Myst is about? I've never gotten through a Let's Play of Myst. It's very quiet.
It has something to do with, like, you write a book and then the book is a portal to another world. Some shit.
Okay. So he's working on that. Muto has become a Raven boy. He's a fucking mess. The actor doesn't know what to do with him anymore. He's very confused.
That's actually true. It's like, that's the thing about him, is that part of the thing, just the way that this show was dubbed, is that everybody was kind of learning about it as they were going on. They didn't have the full picture ahead of them to, like, base the characters around. Neither the actors nor it didn't seem like the casting directors either. So Jay Hickman was cast because he could do the fucking best deadpan asshole, sexy deadpan asshole that I've ever heard, that anybody has ever heard. But then when he became more complex and, like, actually had emotion, he's like, oh, I wasn't ready for this. Because
it becomes very complicated, because there's
another
Prince Muto is, like, resisting the Crow Muto, which is resisting the emotionless Muto, and his heart keeps getting torn out and shoved back in. Like, he's a mess.
Yeah, it's actually a very difficult role, and it's not that Jay Hickman is a bad actor. I just don't think he was given
prepared.
I feel like this show was very difficult to direct. Yeah, I don't think he was prepared to go for it. It is a shortcoming of the dub that once he has to do stuff other than just be completely emotionless and talk 3 feet away from the microphone, the performance isn't as good anymore. But you can't really blame it on him, because there's a lot of factors that go into dubbing, especially something like this, where this is a pretty low budget dub job.
Yeah.
It's frankly kind of astounding that this show was dubbed at all.
Yeah, well, Again, ADV would kind of just buy whatever they felt like. The decisions they made and what to localize are, it's, there's no logic to them. It's just like, okay, somebody just wanted to buy this. Where you take like Lucy Christensen, from the beginning she knew she was going to be playing Duck as a duck, Duck as a girl, and Duck as Princess Tutu from the beginning. She was like, okay, I got it. And so did the casting director, because that was clear from the beginning. But the prince, nobody knew what the fuck was going to happen to this kid, and apparently everything happened to this kid. Apparently, he's not even a kid, he's been the same age this whole time.
He's like 112, but Rue is a kid. Again, don't worry about it.
It was very cute, those flashback scenes when she was a little girl.
Oh, baby Rue is so cute.
She's so cute. I remember, like, hearing Nikki, like, during those scenes, and even he was like, oh no. Like, I was genuinely touched.
Yeah, because like, she's super cute and super sweet, and her piece of shit dad, her fucking anime dad, was being an asshole to her, and I'm like, how, dude? How do you not fucking turn over a new leaf when you have a kid who's this cute? Fuck.
I don't know. Like, as it turns out, she's not actually his daughter. He stole her. She was kidnapped from her human parents once the Raven escaped from the story, and fed his evil blood, and, forced to do his bidding for her whole life. And then she joined the academy as a way to more closely follow her father's orders, but also be close to Muto, because for her whole life, it's always been about Muto. Muto's always made her feel like a person in a way that nowhere else she could get in her life, because the only other figure she had was her dad, who sucks, as we've established. Muto would pay attention to her and make her feel special, which is why she loves him so much. So all this crap is happening, and then there's poor Duck, who's also, like, questioning what she's supposed to be doing, because once the heart shards are all found, she's like, okay, well, if Muto gets all his heart shards, he's gonna go back to being a prince, and he's gonna go back to the story, and then he's gonna fight the Raven, he's gonna defeat the Raven, what's gonna happen to me? I'm gonna be a duck again, and what about my friends? And as it turns out, the very last heart shard is her pendant, her magical pendant that is the source of her powers, and her ability to not be a duck. And even though in her mind she's perfectly willing to give it to Muto to let things be as they're supposed to be, in her heart she can't give it up, because she's like, I don't want to just be a duck. So she goes into the Lake of Despair, or whatever, and Fakir follows her, and they dance, and it's really sweet, and he's like, this is who you are. Like, everything that's happened up until this point has been manipulated by Drosselmeyer. Don't you want to be yourself, and make your own decisions, and, like, not be under the whim of this story? So, they work it out. She's able to let go of it, and become a duck, and let Muto get his full heart and become the prince and fight the Raven, who at this point is, like, trying to take over this town. Which, at this point, we also learn is completely isolated from the rest of the world. And nobody knew about it because Drosselmeyer made it so they couldn't be aware of the fact that they were locked in this town forever and couldn't escape. Climax happens, everything's beautiful. They defeat the Raven because Duck is hope. She is the incarnation of hope and inspires everybody to try their best, and everything works out. And even though this whole story was set up to be a tragedy, because that's what Drosselmeyer wanted it to be, it turns out to have a happy ending, because the story doesn't have to be a tragedy to have meaning or be good. Things can end well, and the story can still be a good story. Drosselmeyer is definitely part of the whole grim, dark school of thought.
He was writing for Image Comics.
Yeah, I mean, I really like where the story ended. I thought it was, like, very moving and beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. And so did Lucy Christian.
Yeah,
in that special feature we watch of her crying at the ending.
Crying uncontrollably. I mean, yeah. I mean, I imagine if you play a character, even if it's not for a very long period of time, you build a special attachment to them. And there's this sort of arc phrase throughout the show that goes like, May those who accept their fate be granted happiness. May those who defy their fate be granted glory. And in the end, the two are able to converge. You get glory by defying your fate, but in the end, there is happiness for you. That's more of what Drosselmeyer is trying to impart on this world he's created. If you accept things as the way they are, you'll be happy, but you won't have this big, meaningful life. Where in the end of the show, it's like, no, you can be happy and fight for what's right, at the same time, and all, because that's what you're fighting for. So I just absolutely love this show. I think it's so brilliantly crafted. It's very entertaining. The music is perfectly incorporated into the narrative. It's all, of course, it's all classical pieces, a lot of Tchaikovsky.
Yeah, so it was all free, which is great, so they didn't have to cut any more corners in the animation.
Right.
A lot of Tchaikovsky, a lot of stuff that's not Tchaikovsky and therefore not as good, but hey.
Well, there other classical stuff.
If you're pregnant, you can watch the show for your for your fetus, and the fetus will get smarter, whatever the fuck.
Oh man. And there's a lot of really cute references to romantic ballet, like apparently most romantic era ballet come in 2 acts, the light and the dark act, and this show is separated by 2 seasons, a light and a dark season, which is well done. The show, even though the actual dancing itself is not done the best, the research of the culture of ballet and all of these little details, like the curtain is the curtains from the opening are the same curtains from the Mariinsky Theater. There's a lot of little touches here and there. The people who are writing this know about this world, know about the history of this art, and they do incorporate it not only into the more superficial things, but into the actual plot of the thing. A lot of these important set pieces mirror set pieces from famous ballet. The Lake of Despair is an important part of Swan Lake, and certain dances and waltzes from certain plays are incorporated into the story and used thematically. I think it's as executed as well as it could have been, writing-wise.
I mean, they definitely put everything they had on there. It's just the money just wasn't. They didn't have the financial freedom to go all out the way that, say, Yuri on Ice did.
Right. And there's a lot of cute little things in retrospect. There's one episode where Duck finds the heart shard of devotion, and it's possessing this young girl who can only draw Rue. And at first it seems really, really gay, but then you think about it and you're like, it's Muto's heart shard of devotion, and all it can draw is Rue, which kind of foreshadows that he loves her somehow. Even though he couldn't be himself through their relationship, he does care about her a lot. It's just very tight. It's very narratively tight, I feel. Certain things that feel more fillery or unnecessary, especially in the beginning, are there for a reason. They have to sort of fill in these gaps ahead of time before the more dramatic things can happen. And they have to get you on the right page as to what's going on, because that first episode can be very jarring, because it's kind of hard to tell what's real, and that's sort of the point. So it has to take its time to step back from that and be like, okay, let's just establish a status quo now so we can break it. You can't break something that's not there. And there's cute little standout characters like Femio and his ridiculousness, and apparently that dance he did, I was doing research, it's actually a real dance. It's called The Afternoon of a Faun, and it was a very controversial dance at the time because it has these overt sexual tones to it. It was part of a new postmodern approach to ballet and dance. So he didn't make that shit up. Apparently it was a real dance.
There's Mr. Cat, of course.
I love Mr. Cat.
So horny.
So
horny, but also racist.
But he was horny for matrimony. The least sexy part of a relationship.
But he only wanted to get married to a 13-year-old white girl.
Pretty much.
Anytime another aminal was like, oh, I want to fuck this cat, he's like, absolutely never, ever, ever, never.
Well, turns out he was just a cat, and he got to get a cat friend. Oh, one thing I want to point out, like, when we were watching the dub, there was one line that Fakir says that sounds really fucking weird. And Nikki was laughing at it, and I was like, what? And I read it, about it, and apparently...
What was the line again?
I'm gonna write a letter to the president.
Fuck, I forgot that!
So
it was so insane!
He does actually say that, because in the first 2 volumes of the anime, the US feature an extra of the dub actors cracking jokes and flubbing their lines. And that was a read he did of that one line that was supposed to be taken out, but they fucked it up and kept the goof line in there for the actual dub.
Oh my god!
So he actually says, I'm gonna write a letter to the president.
Wait, what was the line supposed to be?
He was like, I think he was like, I'm gonna write about Duck or something.
Jesus Christ.
No, he was like, I'm gonna write a letter to Retzel about how I feel.
Okay.
And then, because the way that the line is like, there's only one thing to do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write a letter to the president.
I like kind of snapped awake. What the fuck?
And I was like, no, that's not what he said, but he did. He did say that, and they edited it bad. They did a
Chip Zanoff ass line. Yeah, this is a really cool show. Like, I can understand somebody not digging the dub because it is kind of cheesy.
But the sub is also, pretty wide. I think the dub is a bit more widely available. You can watch the dub on Hulu. And I think it's also, last time I checked, it was on Amazon Prime streaming, but the kind that's included with your Amazon Prime. The DVD set's also very inexpensive. There's a lot of places you can watch it. It's an old show.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a super high profile show, so they're not trying to like make a bunch of money off of it.
I'm thinking about it. I've never heard of anybody talk about this other than you.
Really? Yeah, it's
I mean, I don't run in as many like anime circles as you do.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, it is older, and it's a bit kiddie, and it's about ballet, and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was always a lower profile thing.
Yeah. But it really is just a delightful... You get so
26
invested.
Episodes?
Yes, it's 2 seasons, 13 episodes each, 26 total, which is my perfect, anime.
Honestly, it's the perfect length of any television show.
Honestly, that's like, if you're gonna go a bit longer, it's a good length.
Yeah.
I find. And yeah, that's about mostly what I have to say about it. Oh, there's Autor, who is a fun little...
Who is he again?
He was that guy who was in the background who was like, no talking in the library! And you're like, oh
yeah.
And then he becomes a character, and you're like, oh. Well, that's neat. Thank you, show. And I do like some of the animal puns. I like that armadillo ballerino. He was cute.
Yeah.
I bet he's got some rad moves.
Alright, so that's Princess Tutu. Thumbs up, go watch it.